Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 335 of the All Dolphins podcast on this Saturday. What's the date? August 17th, 2024, the day that the Miami Dolphins get ready and will play their second preseason game of 2024 against the Washington Commanders at Hard Rock Stadium at 7 p.m. I'm joined again by one of my regular co-host guests, Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Can I say this? Sorry, Dave, if I'm outing you, fresh off a morning bike ride. How are you, Dave?
Sure, yeah. Blood's pumping, Alan. It's how you fight the dimming of the light and the narrowing of the hallway. At least when you get in your 60s,
Nice.
Little exercise, always good for the soul.
And very interesting. You brought. I'm gonna throw out something since you mentioned it. I think you threw out a little Dylan Thomas reference right there. And in our European trip this summer, we visited Westminster Abbey, and they have headstones for a whole bunch of famous people. One of them being Dylan Thomas.
Very good. You caught the reference. I rarely find anybody who catches that reference. 1 in 50. You're the rare soul. Good for you.
Rage against the dying of the playoff hopes, or something like that. Yeah, I'm actually maybe a little bit more educated than I might appear. So, okay. On that note,
I throw out the occasional reference to make it appear I'm more educated than I really am.
There you go. That's good. As long as we got the people fooled. So, all kidding aside, we do know what we're talking about when it comes to the Miami Dolphins. We're not going to spend a ton of time. We'll do like a very brief discussion about this playoff game. It's a playoff game. Wow. Talk about the opposite, this preseason game against Washington, and discuss some more important overall philosophical topics. And this is where us as journalists who want to keep readers engaged 24/7, 365, to downplay the significance of a preseason game might be self-defeating, bad Allen, except, again, we also have to be clear that preseason games will only tell us so much. Isn't that right, Dave Hyde?
Yeah, absolutely. And, training camp only tells you so much. 2 weeks ago, Quentin Bell was a big story of Dolphin camp. Now you don't really talk about him. And so where is he? Maybe this preseason game is important to him. It's important to certain individuals, but we all know preseason rarely foretells anything about a season.
The first rule about Quentin Bell is you don't talk about Quentin Bell. Pop culture reference here. No, and here's the thing. And this is not to suggest that Dolphin fans should not get excited by what they saw against Atlanta in the preseason opener by the rookie draft class.
Correct.
Very, very impressive. Jalen Wright, Patrick Paul, Malik Washington, Patrick McMorris all played really, really well and gave you every reason to hope and be optimistic that those guys are going to be good players and that maybe they can contribute earlier than later. Having said that, there's a big difference between that level and also then saying all of a sudden, because Jalen Wright looked really, really good against Atlanta, that the Dolphins have another 1,000-yard rusher on their roster. And
I would say with Patrick Paul,
another one.
I thought it was a little over the top. And look, this isn't a criticism of Patrick Paul at all. He made some blocks. You say, okay, you see what's there. You see why they liked him now. Okay, you see what they're working on. But consistency and all that isn't there, and it shouldn't be. It's no surprise it's not there. But all these people say, "Oh, he's ready to play." Right? He's not. He's really not. What you see is there's a lot of good clay to be molded. But let's take it down a notch here.
Yeah. Floating Hearts just appeared for those who were listening on the audio podcast version, as I do on my MacBook Pro and have the ability to do. And yet, I've not had a guest or a co-host with the ability to match what I do. So I take great pride in it. I don't know if I have a magic touch or a really good MacBook Pro. I don't know. So,
and I can't do it.
There you go, like this.
I don't have those superpowers.
There you go. Okay. No, that's the thing. And again, Patrick Paul was going against second and third teamers, playing for Atlanta defense that was going to be as extraordinarily vanilla as could be. There are plenty of stories of guys lighting it up in preseason. Ryan Leaf, I think, is one guy who comes to mind. Talk about a weird reference. Looking like whoa in the preseason, and then all of a sudden the regular season starts, and they play. I believe they played Kansas City. Don't ask me why I remember this because I'm crazy with stuff like this. In his first NFL regular season game, all of a sudden the defense that they play throws all sorts of different looks at him, and he is like completely discombobulated. Throws like 4 picks, and then it would there. I mean, there goes this whole notion that this guy be reviewed. So the whole point is, yes, Patrick Paul looks like he could be a keeper, could be a really, really good left tackle in the future. I think this notion that, again, if something were to happen to Teron Armstead in the regular season, I think it's pretty clear to me Kendall Lamb's the guy who's going in and not Patrick Paul.
Absolutely. Yeah. I again, good clay to be molded, but it's got to be molded, and no surprise there. That's what they expected.
Fair enough. Where do you stand on the idea of you should get your starters at least some work in the preseason, or it doesn't matter, the work should be done in practices? Why expose them to injury?
You know what? I'm looking across the NFL to find an answer. Andy Reid supposedly is going to play his starters a half. This is Super Bowl, 2-time Super Bowl champs playing them a half. Meanwhile, you got teams from Tennessee to Indianapolis go down the line who aren't playing their starters at all. If the NFL's the people who stay up at night and wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. thinking about such things can't come to a answer. That's how in the world are we supposed to know what what they're throwing? They're looking for an answer. And preseason training camp is being reinvented across the league right now, and nobody knows exactly how to do it other than how to do it for your particular team. You got to try to make that work. Andy Reid's got his methods and they work. And Patrick Mahomes wants to play. He wants to get on the field, and so it works for them. And I understand why. Look, where I stand is I think you need to get out there some. You can't, especially a team like the Dolphins this year. They got to get off to a fast start. They play 2 games, Sunday and Thursday. They got to win. Jacksonville, they might be competing with a playoff spot with, and Buffalo is a team they got to get over to win the AFC East. And if they don't do it this year, when do they do it? Because they're ready, and Buffalo has had to take a dip down on the roster because of salary issues. So I would say get players out there today, get starters out there today. They got to get their feet wet a little, get the rhythm going. But where that line is a mystery, even for the coaches.
No, I agree. And part of the issue is you don't want to unnecessarily expose players to injury, but they play football. So even if in the practice, it could be just a wrong step and something goes awry. So do you keep them in bubble wrap until the regular season? And the flip side to that is I watched Tua and Tyreek in practice, and whenever Tyreek shows up 20 minutes late after conditioning and stretching and some position drills, goes right into the play, and he's wide open, and Tua hits him. And it's like, okay. And then it's kind of the same with Waddle. Those guys get open like kind of all the time. So how much work is needed from that standpoint?
You know what? I also would say, everybody say, oh, you're protecting the players by not playing them. But there's a lot of medical people, not a lot, I've talked to like 3 or 4, and some coaches who say, they got to get out there. You can't go from 0 to 60 in one afternoon. You got to get your body tuned up a little for going full speed. So there's a lot of thoughts out there, and like I said, I think the NFL's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and this is where you brought up Andy Reid in the first place here, and I think might be a decent example to follow. Of course, this is where we can say, well, yeah, sure, he's got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, which kind of helps whatever decision he makes. However, there's something to be said for that. And then the flip side is I seem to recall Peyton Manning practically never playing in the preseason and the Colts being pretty damn good during his career. So all sorts of philosophies. There's probably not one exact right way, such as, and another example of that is the training camp philosophy, or as Dolphin tight ends coach, associate head coach John Embry very quickly slipped in there. Oh, you mean preschool? So, yeah, the Dolphins' approach has been, I think, load management is the term that we would best describe. Now, players are dealing also with some minor injuries. The Dolphins, as they are not required to do, don't provide injury information on every player. Mike McDaniel will reveal certain things at certain times with certain players. But for, I'll give you an example, linebacker Anthony Walker Jr., who looked really, really good in the spring, off veteran acquisition from the Cleveland Browns, hasn't practiced in about 2 weeks. Zero clue what's going on with him. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't practiced since he signed with the Dolphins in May. We still don't know the nature of his injury. So, having said all that, when you see a guy on, off, then this is where obviously we're doing some load management here. With Jalen Waddle, he's nursing something that Mike McDaniel has said was minor, except now we're going on 2 weeks without him practicing. So, and I know you wrote a column about this, the notion of training camp philosophy, how hard is too hard, how soft is too soft. And it's going to appear soon at sunsentinel.com.
Yeah, next week it'll be coming out. Yeah.
Okay, and as well in the print version in the football preview section. Those are always great. Love those. So without revealing everything you wrote, where do you stand on this idea of too hard, too soft? What's the right approach to training camp?
Well, where I stand is, I don't know. I mean, that's a terrible thing to
There
say
you
as
go.
a columnist.
That's a good column.
As a columnist, but the point being, again, the NFL is trying to reinvent it. And you know what I appreciate about Mike McDaniel is he's never constrained by where things were. Okay, we don't run the, look at the offense. We don't know how creative that is and things they come up with. Okay, so but the issue is like, and you saw it this summer, and it was striking to me. I was standing there at the end of the Dolphins Atlanta joint practice, and there's Atlanta running sprints as a team after practice, which is a scene you could go back to see in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, 60s, the 50s. It's as much a football as goalposts, okay? And there are the Dolphins taking off their shoulder pads, walking off the field, talking with each other, and going to the locker room or cooling down. They don't run sprints. And I asked Mike McDaniel about it, and he said, long answer short, that he's talked to the players. We can use that energy and run. We can run an infinite more amount of reps than our opponents in practice if we take that energy. So I see the thinking now. Are all the players buying in? And of course they're all equipped now with science, measuring GPS and all that. So I see it. I see the idea. That's just one example. There are a lot of other examples of things the Dolphins aren't doing. During the Washington practice, I saw a Washington official afterwards who I'd known, and the Dolphins in their warm up where they're running against air, little pass formations, they don't wear helmets. They don't wear football pads during the scrimmage, the 11 on 11. Meanwhile, you look over across the field, there's Washington, all helmets on, in football gear, going on. And so what you have, again, there's two differing ideas on how to do it. I don't know which one's right or which one's wrong. There's a part of me that appreciates Mike saying, come on, really, why are you wear a helmet to get hot? So I get what's going on. Now you fold that into the bigger issue, and I wrote something about this a few weeks ago. To me, the big issue of training camp for this team, beyond finding certain positions is what Jordan Poyer said. Jordan Poyer, at the first day of training camp, said that the team folds, and the reputation from Buffalo, they thought about the Dolphins, they fold in big moments. So how do you not fold in big moments? Do they need to get tougher? Do they need to figure out something if it's true, if they even believe that? So anyways, how do you thread the needle between getting tougher as a team and not doing things that traditionally have helped toughen you up as a team? So,
yep.
You tell me, where do you stand, Alan?
Oh, no. The floor is yours. I'll let you know. I'll let you know in January if it was the right approach.
Right. That's where I'm standing.
Yeah.
There's a great way to measure what works in sports and what doesn't. And I mean, it's a small sample size if the Dolphins are only doing this, but it will be a telling sample size.
No, correct. And it comes down to it's new age versus old fashioned. It's analytics versus the school of hard knocks approach. I kind of tend to think again. Look at the white hair. I think that may tell you where I lean. But here's the thing, though. For example, for anybody who would be like, well, why isn't Teron Armstead doing any 11s on 11s? I mean, get him ready for the season. That's all great. And we were saying that last year. And then he gets in the lineup in a joint practice against Houston. And then somebody, I don't remember what happened, but he sustains a lower leg injury and boom, he's out for a couple of weeks. So it's always a fine. I don't, like you said, I don't think there is a right way and a wrong way. And I would give Mike McDaniel still the benefit of the doubt. I did a radio interview with Washington this week and was asked about the notion of maybe Mike McDaniel's seat getting a little hot if the Dolphins don't win a playoff game. And to me is like not even remotely. It wouldn't even get lukewarm unless the Dolphins go 5-12 and injuries are not a factor. I mean, Dolphins have, number one, they've become relevant, which I'm sure matters a lot to owner Stephen Ross. They've become more valuable, which I'm sure financially in terms of valuation per Sportico. I believe the same other website. I apologize if it's not accurate. And they're making the playoffs. So now what fans want, I'm sure what Stephen Ross wants is for them to actually take the next step. But how does that get done? And I've struggled with Jordan Poyer's comments because I remember if you go back at the games last year where they kind of fell short down the stretch at Baltimore, at Buffalo in the playoff game. To me, was it really an issue of toughness and not being able to bounce back when adversity strikes, or was it an issue of just not being quite good? And injuries absolutely played a role, but more importantly, of just not being quite good enough in key areas.
Well, I would say point to the Buffalo game, and consider Jordan Poyer played on Buffalo. The Buffalo game here that really settled the season for they lost their home field advantage. All of a sudden, they got to go to Kansas City on the road in the cold. If I were to point to one game where the team fell short and didn't match the moment, it'd be that game. So maybe Poyer was firsthand emotion or feeling of that game is what he said. But look, the fact that Poyer told us, he told the team that, and when he's interviewing with the team, I'm sure McDaniel and Greer, whoever else, what do you think of the Dolphins? And he's laid it out there. He told the players, I'm sure he's not just coming in and saying in a press conference, oh yeah, the feeling was he'd let that idea be known inside the team, and whether it's right or wrong, it's something to be addressed.
Sure, and then part of it to me, I think, may have been just a motivational tool to get the team fired up, and if they weren't. Maybe they were not the toughest mentally, the toughest team in the league. Even if it helps increase that level 3%, something.
Yeah, and sometimes teams need. You know what? I love how the Dolphins sound this training camp. The one, and I get words only mean so much, and et cetera, et cetera. But like Teron Armstead, look, we know we need to be better in the big moments. He said, I talked yesterday. Asked him a question, what did they learn last? We know we got to get to the big moments and focus and be better. So they know they've come. You see this a lot of times. Sometimes teams need to hit the barrier a few times before they get over it. So we'll see if they get over it.
Yeah, I always caution, and I've taken some flack for this. I always caution against buying too much comments that are made at training camp. Because again, everybody's 0-0. There's hope in every single solitary NFL city, except maybe Carolina this year. Because if you're being honest with yourself, or even New England. I mean, if you're in New England and going, it's going to be a big year, think you're a little delusional, but everywhere else, if things fall right, so I always caution against the bravado that comes out of these media sessions, and always suggest pay attention to the details and not the big comments that are made. That applies even more so to teammate comments about other guys on the team.
Oh, absolutely.
Because spoiler alert,
yeah.
Everybody's great, everybody's promising, everybody's going to be awesome. Pay attention to the details of what they say.
I will say, if Poyer's comment to me was very relevant, and Tua made a comment to me that was equally as relevant, where he said, "It's not Mike's team, it's our team," meaning the players' team. And you would never hear that. You talk about how times have changed. Shula, Jimmy Johnson, Saban, Brian Flores, you would never hear that. And so this feeds into your idea of the training camp, the question and training methods and all that. There's a bigger picture to it all, in that Mike it's a psychology experiment almost. If you hand the reins to the players. Now Mike's in control, we get that, but by being in control, he's handing the reins to the players and saying, "This is your team," and letting everybody deal with it that way. And so one of two things happen: either they take ownership and are very good, or as Saban, I remember once saying, things you get hired for are the things you'll get fired for. And so it's a interesting, that's an experiment too, that a coach, but that's Mike's way. That I think he's more comfortable in being and letting it out in his third year, right? This is the way we do things, but it's been the way for the very player friendly and very positive. I'd love to work for a boss like that. Now, does it lead to more wins? Well, that's what we're going to find out.
That's the question. And I would have thought that what you really remember Nick Saban saying was, I don't know how many times I have to say it, I'm not going to be the Alabama coach.
I do remember that. Yeah.
For those not aware, it was Dave who kept persisting with Nick Saban in the end of 2026 amid the rumors that Nick Saban was about to become the Alabama coach. And Nick Saban kept dancing around the question. In his defense, he was kind of in a tough spot. But Dave was like, "No, you're going to say it." And
no, I said, "Why don't you just say if you're staying? Why don't you just say you're staying?" He goes, "I thought I did say that." I go, "No, you didn't." And so, but in fairness, and I thought he was staying at that time. I quickly learned from a couple of phone calls in the next couple of days from people that, oh no, he's not. There's serious questions if he's staying.
Yeah, and as we all know, he went. And not sure it would have. Sorry.
Good for him. I mean, it worked out for him, and I never questioned. We don't need to go backtrack here, but I never questioned Heising. If a guy wants to leave, you got to let him leave. If his heart's not in it, and it worked out. That was the best move for him.
And ultimately, I don't know if I'd say this was the best move for the Dolphins. I don't know how successful he ever could have been as an NFL head coach, because it just flat out wasn't the same game. And
if he had picked Drew Brees, I'm with Jason. Jason Taylor, I remember I was talking to him, and he said if we got Drew Brees, we would have been right there with the Patriots. Him and Saban and Brees, and with our defense. And I tend to agree with him that he would have had a long run. There's the issue in the NFL. You got to get the quarterback. That's why I say 60% of a GM's job at least is getting the right quarterback, and getting him for a duration.
We're going to do a little segue. Segues are for kids. Talking about quarterbacks, how about we discuss backup quarterbacks? And this is where I'm going to throw an overreaction flag at you, my friend, because you wrote a column this week on sunsentinel.com suggesting, promoting, pushing the idea that the Dolphins make a phone call to secure the service, or at least inquire about bringing back one Ryan Tannehill. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm not impressed by. Now I'm not out practice every day like you, okay. But I'm out, 2-3 times a week, say, And I haven't been impressed by the quarterback play. The back here we are. Didn't need him last year.
118.1 passer rating, baby.
Is that
Mike
what it
White.
was? Okay. Well, I mean, in fairness, look.
It's 6
I'm
passes.
just not impressed. I'm not impressed. And if the season comes down to them, I look around and say, I was talking to Jimmy Johnson this week, and he said it before. Backup quarterback's the number two most important position on a team, and I get why he says that. If a season comes down to 3 games where you're running the backup quarterback, okay, how comfortable are you now? Ryan Tannehill, this system isn't made for him. I get that. Is it made for Mike White?
A lot more than it is for Ryan
Tannehill. I
Tannehill.
don't know about that, and maybe a little more for Skylar Thompson, but um, um, I'm looking at the experience. The guy who's been there, he could step in, and he's not going to be. The moment's not going to be too big for him or anything. So, that's really what I'm looking at is for if Tua goes out and we're just talking a normal NFL quarterback injury at this point of 1 or 2 or 3 games, are you comfortable with where you are at backup quarterback right now?
And I would say, to me, I think they can win again if the pieces on offense are working. Here's the thing, and let me back up your point. What you've seen in those practices you've attended is what's been going on. The backup quarterback play has not looked good. More so than not being good, it has not looked good. And here's part of the issue. And what we saw in the preseason opener is when Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are not in the game, it doesn't look the same. Receivers are not getting open. And then on top of that, for Mike White, he came in the second half. We're not talking about second teamers. Now we're talking about third teamers. He played with 3 wide receivers.
I get that. Yeah.
He played with 3 wide receivers who were not with the Dolphins when July arrived. Mike Harley Jr., Willie Snead IV, and Kyrique McGowan with third team offensive linemen. Guys are not getting open, and then you see Mike White in the pocket, and he's looking around. He can't find anybody open, and it looks bad. Because here's the thing. There have been a couple of practices when Tua is operating and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are not practicing because Waddle's nursing an injury and Tyreek either's on a rest or whatever. The offense isn't humming the way it hums when those guys are in the lineup. Now, it still looks better because Tua is obviously a lot more is a better quarterback, number one, and B, he's got a lot more experience in this offense. But it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look pretty. So to me, I am not ready to push that panic button. Now, if Mike White starts at quarterback against Washington with the starters and they decide not to play Tua and it looks like crap, then I got concerns. Skylar Thompson, I think we know what kind of quarterback he is. I don't know that my trust level in him is the same as it would be in Mike White. I don't think there's a huge difference between the two. I think Mike White has a lot more regular season game experience than Skylar Thompson does. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike White's started 6 games, I think. I mean,
seven NFL starts.
7, okay. My thought would have been, I would have hoped one of them would have separated from the other to say, this is clearly the backup quarterback, and the fact that Skylar Thompson played and started last game tells that there is no separation. Because when you want, if Mike White was the clear cut backup quarterback, he's going in with the better team, and he's playing with those guys, and because I want him to get that rhythm, get the speed, the better speed.
Hear me out. Sorry to cut you off, or hear me out. Maybe they've already decided Mike White's their number 2, and now they're in the process of deciding whether they want to allot a third roster spot to Skylar Thompson, or they're going to try to sneak him on the practice squad.
I think there's better use. I think there's better use of those plays with Mike White, who didn't play all last year, to get him some reps, some quality reps than that. I mean, if they don't have a decision on Skylar Thompson, I'm not sure a few reps in a preseason game is going to decide it. So I'll be curious what they do. I would assume, like you mentioned, I would assume Mike White comes in first tonight, just to, if it is a square up competition, and we'll see how it goes.
Here's other factor here. Would Ryan Tannehill have any interest in coming in as a pure backup?
Yeah, there's the question. To me, there are two sides to that, and I put in the column. Probably should have played it up a little more, but would Ryan Tannehill want to do this? Does he see himself more in the Joe Flacco role of a year ago, where veteran guy who's waiting for an injury and he can step in? And Flacco came in mid-season to Cleveland, became the NFL comeback player of the year. So maybe he's not ready to go back up yet. And maybe just as some Dolphin fans didn't want him to come back, I thought some of it was ridiculous. Like, oh, if he comes back and two has a bad game, fans will be calling from it. Nobody's going to be doing that.
Well, Dave, some. Well,
I shouldn't say nobody's going to be doing that, but nobody's going to listen to those people. Okay, yeah. Okay. So, but maybe he doesn't want to. If he's going to go be a backup, he'll go elsewhere. I have no idea what his thinking is, just as I rarely had any idea what his thinking is when he was here. My one question would be, he's not a great, a lot of backups have great personality and hail fellow to go around and that's not Ryan. And no. So, but again, for the experience, for, being a bridge to save a season, if it comes to that, that's why I said get that phone ready if need be coming up.
No, I concur. And Tannehill has said he's only going to consider continuing his career under the right circumstances. And it was very interesting that Minnesota now put J.J. McCarthy, their first-round pick, on IR. It means he's done for the year. Now they're rolling with Sam Darnold, and then they signed another quarterback this week. They signed Matt Corral. Which tells you, they're rolling with Darnold. That could be a team if Darnold struggles early on or gets injured. Maybe they make a phone call. And there are worse starting quarterbacks in the NFL than Ryan Tannehill right now. Vegas is rolling with Aiden
Vegas is the team to me. Yeah, I think Sam Darnold will be a sleeper fantasy pick. Very cheap. He's on a great offense. He's never had a good offense around him when he's played in San Francisco, obviously, but he's a backup. I think there you go, sleeper value pick.
Okay, and if it goes south, the Twitter handle is @DaveSports.
If it goes south, I don't play fantasy football, so.
Okay, fair
what
enough.
do I know?
Okay. Any final thoughts here as we wrap up this? And then programming alert. I will be doing a live show right after the game. I post my instant takeaways on Miami Dolphins on SI. And now I'm happy to share that URL works. If you do MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com, boom, you will get the same URL you see under my name here. And then you can read our vast number of stories every day. And again, right after the game, I'll have instant takeaways. Then I will be doing a live recap show here on YouTube for the All Dolphins podcast. So, Dave, any final thoughts here?
My final, I'm curious to get to past the preseason games, which are increasingly less and less important in the NFL, the way they structured, what teams value, what they go at, and get, I'm interested in who's really hurt on the Dolphins. Isaiah Wynn, I assume he's seriously hurt because we haven't seen him even work it out. Okay. And you don't hear him. Odell Beckham Jr., is he going to be available at the start? Jalen Phillips is off PUP. That's a big step back to normal. The question becomes, there's still a lot of hoops to jump through as far as being an explosive player. To me, he's the model player for the Dolphins of what you want a guy to be, and at an impact position and quality person. Very important player on the team. And so, to me, beyond the preseason games, I'm curious of the health of the team going into game one.
I lied to you, Dave. I apologize because I'm going to get another final thought from you. Did want to get your reaction when you saw the Twitter exchange between OBJ and the fan who basically was suggesting he's Will Fuller 2.0.
You know, I looked up. He has like 4.1 or 4.2 million followers, and here he's got some guy. We all, anybody who's on a platform, any platform of social media, and I'm not on that kind of that size of a platform, has people say ridiculous things. That's the medium. Okay, there's no need. I think he has to be a better person, better, smarter play. Maybe he was just in a bad mood. I've tweeted out things and I quickly erased them because I think, no, that's stupid to do. And I'd like to think that's probably what happened to him. He put it out there and I thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But ignore it. Ignore a fan saying something about comparing him to Will Fuller.
No, I hear you. And again, you and I as journalists will get it from time to time, like getting insults or whatever. Nothing like players who have, like, first of all, what multiple times of the number of followers that we have, and they're also a lot more high profile, and they'll get all the time. And at times it can be difficult, but what players need to do is just basically the role of, especially when it gets personal. I get it, but this being compared to Will Fuller 2.0, while insulting, is not necessarily personal.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, we hope to see Odell Beckham Jr. in action sooner rather than later. He remains on PUP. On August 27th, the Dolphins will have to make a decision whether to move him to reserve PUP, which would sideline him. Go ahead.
Well, one more comment on this, because we talk about what players say. Tua said something interesting, which was, a couple years ago, the Dolphins had Devontae Parker and Will Fuller and a couple other receivers. They're like having lunch every practice. They'd sit over there and stand on the sideline. They couldn't practice, and you'd ask the coach, "Oh no, it's going to be fine," and Tua, "No, it's going to be fine. We don't need him." And everybody knew there has to be some practice for real. And today, this week, Tua, I believe it was this week, Tua was asked about OBJ, and he said, I need to practice with them. I need to practice with them to know, there has to be some type of chemistry there. And I thought that was a good comment that instead of just saying, no, we're going to be fine, we can just go out there in game one and it'll be fine. No. And so sometimes you filter through the unnecessary questions, and I'm not just answers, the questions, but also you do get nuggets out of what people say.
No, and Tua made a good point also, is that with every receiver likes to run comes out of the breaks differently, and you develop the knowledge of like right by now, Tua knows exactly when Tyreek's making a cut. He knows what that cut's going to look like. He's not there at all with Beckham because they haven't worked together. So anyway, as I was saying, August 27th, the Dolphins either have to move him to reserve PUP. Right now he's on active PUP, counts against the 90, can be activated any time. When he goes on reserve PUP, now he's out for the first 4 games of the regular season, would not count against the 53, or they put him on the 53, and then he could play whenever he was available to play. Or again, and the other part of, technically, I have to mention this because it's also an option, is they could just waive him or waive him injured, whatever. But obviously not thinking along those lines. Hopefully it's on the 53. So on that note, thanks as always to Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. You catch his work at sunsentinel.com. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Hyde Sports. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And then we will catch you after the game Saturday night against the Washington Commanders. In the meantime, have a great Saturday.